Good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. Today is May 4th, 2026. This is the first in a series of three webinar by the Electrification Action Team of Citizens Climate Lobby. And we have focused, as most everybody on this call knows, as a CCLer, we focus primarily on engaging with elected officials at the federal level and in some cases at the state level. But there's a great saying out there, which is, who are the 250 most important people in the United States that you've never heard of? And those are the five public utility commissioners in each of our 50 states. And public utility commissions, sometimes known as public service commissions or other names, have a really outsized impact on the U.S. Electrical grid. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. And that's not taking effect. If you would mute yourselves, please, I would appreciate it. So those 250 public utility commissioners are the ones who manage the investor-owned utilities and other utility companies that deliver many of our essential services. And we're going to get into understanding how they operate and how to engage with them. There are many similarities with our legislative processes and how to interact, but there are also some key differences. So tonight, first, one of our steering committee members on the electrification team, Michael Metzner, is going to go through a short deck giving an overview of the industry structure and of the utility commissions and their role. And then we have a really special guest, Tremaine Phillips, who is presently the president of Third Coast Strategies, but he has in the recent past been a commissioner for the Michigan Public Service Commission, and he is also a senior advisor to one of the most exciting new nonprofits that I know of. It's a group called PowerLines.org, and it's founded by a gentleman named Charles Hua, who as a high school student was a CCLer and convinced his school district to install solar panels way up in Madison, Wisconsin, and has gone on to have a great career with a couple of organizations that we all know and love: Rewiring America, the Department of Energy's Loan Programs Office, where he worked alongside Jigger Shaw, and now he's founded this group called PowerLines, and Tremaine Phillips is one of his key advisors in that group. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with Michael's presentation and have a very short Q&A after that, and then Tremaine will sort of give us the insider's view of how it works from being a commissioner. Michael, ready to go?
Okay, I think I got muted in the mass muting.
Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Anyway, welcome everybody to part one of a three-part series on electricity, affordability, and electrification. I think the only thing that Pete said that was wrong is it's not exactly a short deck, but I'll try to move with some pace. Today's focus is on state public utility commissions, and which go by various names, as we said. Our goal is to understand how decisions get made in these PUCs and how we can influence them. Let's start with why this matters for electrification. Bit of a busy chart, but the point is electrification only works if it is affordable. Right now, price signals are too often working against electrification. Cheap fossil fuels, not at the moment, I understand, and expensive electricity. To incentivize the massive amount of electrification needed to meet our climate goals, we need lower electric rates, and we need, and again, this is going to sound sacrilege at this point, higher fossil fuel costs. but we need it through policy, not through global conflict. PUCs are critical to the first half of this equation. A price on carbon and carbon border adjustment are critical to the second half, but that's a subject for another day. Okay, a public utility commission is a definition. It's a state level government body that regulates essential services like electricity, water, and gas. Think of them as the grid's referees. Why they exist is because we have a thing called natural monopolies, which include electric, gas, and water utilities. Natural monopoly occurs when a single firm can supply the entire market's demand at a lower cost than multiple competing firms. So it makes no sense for them to compete themselves into the ground. And this creates market power, which is the ability of one firm to drive down price enough to cut out the competition. So there's oversight needed, and that oversight is the PUC's job. The main purpose of a PUC is to implement what we call the regulatory compact. The core of this compact is that the public gets reliable service at just and reasonable rates, while utilities get a fair, quote, fair profit opportunity. It's different than a guaranteed profit opportunity. In short, PUCs act as a bridge between utilities, customers, and public policy, ensuring that services are delivered reliably, affordably, and in line with broader societal goals. So how do PUCs actually set rates? Again, a lot of data on the slide, but the main point is rates are built from operating costs, which are things like purchase power, labor, maintenance, customer service administration, infrastructure costs, which show up in the accounting as depreciation on the current rate base and whatever rate base is left, and taxes and return on investment. So this is, I mean, there's obviously there's a lot more to this, but this is sort of the basic formula behind your bill. The key concept inside this formula is rate base. Utilities earn a return on equity, which is approved by the Public Utility Commission. The more infrastructure, the more profit potential. Actually, the more profit is almost, the amount isn't guaranteed, but if they're spending the money, more often than not, they'll get recovery for it and a return on it. This creates a built-in incentive to build more stuff, which in turn creates an important tension for climate and affordability. Typical rate-based models incentivize utilities to maximize investment in infrastructure versus other goals, such as addressing climate and affordability. Let's look at how PUCs are structured. This is just a real simple graphic. The commissioners are either appointed or elected. In the majority of cases, they're appointed by the executive, by the governor of the state. It functions more like a court system than other parts of government, including judges, including technical staff. It's a highly legal and technical environment in which these rate cases are adjudicated. The map shows most commissioners, as we mentioned, are appointed by governors. That means political influence matters. And elections indirectly shape energy policy. PUCs are essential players in climate and energy policy as well, because they're the ones that are implementing the clean energy and renewable energy portfolio standards, electrification policies, grid upgrades. The PUC determines who pays, how costs are allocated. This directly impacts affordability and political viability. And like most things in this industry, these policies and standards differ quite a bit by state. I don't expect you can actually read this slide, but the point is the variety of colors and numbers between renewable portfolio standards in some states, clean energy standards in some, clean energy goals, renewable energy goals. There are almost as many flavors of clean energy goals and standards as there are states, and each of the state PUCs are responsible for implementing their state's particular flavor. In case we don't already have enough reasons to care about PUCs, here's a few more. Through their regulatory oversight of gas and electric utilities, PUCs, along with local governments, play a key role in driving building electrification and energy efficiency, one of CCL's core policy pillars. Buildings account right now for 13% of direct greenhouse gas emissions and 30%, including emissions from the power generated to supply their electricity. So this is a big opportunity set, as you can imagine. Transitioning from predominantly gas-fired furnaces to electric heat pumps for space and water heat, combined with meeting that incremental demand with renewable energy, is the best way we know to take a big chunk out of that 30%. In addition to, all right, in addition to helping achieve our climate and affordability goals, there are also bigger system shifts underway. Particularly salient right now is the fact that in addition to favorable climate and economic attributes, transitioning from a fossil fuel-based energy system to clean and renewable sources of energy has strategic benefits beyond affordability. There's three of them listed here. One, the fact that fossil fuels are trade reliant versus more independent for renewables. Fossil fuels are global, renewables are local, and tend to be energy independent. They tend to help with energy independence, sorry, as opposed to global dependence. And there's a big infrastructure shift going on as we make more and more of the generation stack from renewables. We move from ships and ports and pipelines to wire storage and local generation. And fossil fuels, which are exposed to wars, shipping disruptions, and price shocks. Renewables are exposed to weather variability, which is meaningful, and grid constraints. Bottom line, the energy transition is not just about emissions, it's a shift from a global fuel system to a local electricity system. So let's zoom back into governance, and at the heart of that are these PUCs implementing these policies state by state. Governors can exert power over PUCs in several ways. As we already saw, governors appoint the commissioners in most states. They can propose legislation or issue executive orders, such as setting of clean energy goals, and they can put pressure on individual commissioners. The legislature, for its part, writes the Public Utility Code and controls the PUC budget and can subpoena commissioners to testify at oversight hearings. The PUC sits in the middle of these political forces, which may pull in different directions. This creates some risks, like what's often referred to as regulatory capture, when utilities are accused of overly influencing the PUC that regulates them. Public involvement can be used to counter this effect, but risks do include the revolving door between these government positions and the private sector, over-reliance on utility data. In addition, utilities often have greater expertise because they have greater resources, which can skew outcomes. And they're definitely not neutral players. Another thing to keep an eye on is large IOUs have much greater resources than PUC. So anyway, this is why citizen engagement is so important. Key tools for public involvement include the ability to make public comments on rate cases, the ability to be an intervener, which is a more complex process, but also a more powerful process, consumer advocates. The simplest and easiest way is to submit a statement or to contact your state consumer advocate. Your CCL chapter can partner with and support organized groups that are registered interveners in your state. Who are these groups? Excuse me. Each state has their own interveners. but AARP is the big one. And our colleague uh, Michael Friedman did some research here. AARP is registered more than 80% of the states. And so one way to get involved is to reach out to your local state representative from the AARP, and you can become more active along with them, and they will have they could help with that for certain. How else can citizens get involved and influence the process? This is an example from the California PUC website. They make it easy to follow and comment on issues of concern. They're legally required to review each comment. Check out the process for commenting in your state. Okay, let's recap the big points. PUCs are central, in conclusion, PUCs are central to the energy transition. Their decisions directly affect affordability, climate, energy security, as we talked about. Engagement works, especially through structured advocacy. Use the public advisor to stay informed. Join and or support an advocacy or intervener group. The right side of the slide shows 4 ways to provide comments to the California PUC. Something similar likely exists in your state. So this should be and is really a high leverage area for CCL with our broad-based grassroots membership. So look into getting involved with your state's PUC. Now back to Pete.
Pete, and thank you, Michael. That was a really thorough and great overview of an often obscure um, function and role in regards to PUCs. I have just really brief remarks to make at the beginning, and I much rather this be an interactive discussion. I'm seeing a lot of good questions already pop up. So if I'm not wanting to muck up your agenda, but if you wouldn't mind, I could just set some make some foundational comments, and then we can go ahead and roll right into Q&A discussion. But
Yeah,
let me know how you advise.
absolutely. No, that's perfect, Tremaine. Thank you so much. And if you have slides, feel free to present some. Otherwise, I can spotlight you for folks, and then we'll take Q&A.
No, I will just go ahead and take the spotlight, Pete. No slides
All
this
right.
evening for me. Good afternoon, everyone, once again, and thank you again for the invitation. My name, once again, is Tremaine Phillips. I've spent about 20 years now working in the policy and regulatory spaces at the intersection of community development, climate change, and energy infrastructure. And as briefly mentioned, I'm speaking to you all from a number of different perspectives and roles this evening. First, I'm a former Public Utilities Commissioner. I was appointed by the Whitmer administration, and I served the Michigan Public Service Commission from 2019 to 2023. In that capacity, I regulated the state's IOUs, and I saw a question in the comments. IOUs are investor-owned utilities. So those are different than your municipal-owned utilities or your rural cooperative utilities. But we regulated the state's investor-owned utilities as it related to the electricity utilities, natural gas, steam, and telecommunications utilities. And on the telecommunications end, that's an increasingly dwindling role for public utility commissions, just for awareness. That's largely landline service and cable television service, as well as some other more obscure areas. State PUCs do not regulate broadband service, so that's just one particular insight for you all. That is regulated by the FCC at a federal level. But I currently run an energy policy and regulatory consulting firm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, called Third Coast Strategies. And then, as mentioned before, I am also an advisor and consultant to a national nonprofit utility bill consumer advocate called PowerLines. And PowerLines is centrally focused on one, lowering utility prices for energy consumers, and two, advancing economic development and growth. So trying to thread the needle and figure out the path on how we can achieve both of those goals simultaneously. And I was just with the PowerLines team for a mini retreat in Washington, D.C. Just returned yesterday evening, so a lot of this is very fresh in my mind, and happy to talk more with you all about some of our current goals and objectives, and maybe where some of our work could overlap as well. But in regards to the topic of energy affordability, I will just briefly note that I think we are all experiencing the impacts of increasing utility bills. In February of this year, I paid the largest electric and gas bill I personally have ever received. I use Monarch, which is a bill tracking app if anyone else uses it. But my utility bill expenses in 2025 were up by a third from 2024. And this isn't just vibes. This is not just anecdotes. The data backs up what households and small businesses are often reporting and feeling. PowerLines recently released a 2025 utility bills are rising report, and that research found that since 2021, residential electricity prices have increased by nearly 40% domestically. And just between December of 2024 and December of 2025, residential electricity prices have risen by 7%, while natural gas prices have gone up by 11%. And this has outpaced overall inflation, which has gone up by 3% in that same time period. So, energy bills are now outpacing groceries. They were for a time outpacing gasoline, but can't say that any longer. Outpacing the cost of vehicles, medicine, in terms of the fastest drivers of inflation in this country. Just a couple of months ago, I was at a barbershop, took my son, and I overheard the barber next to me mention that their utility bills had doubled, and he commented that it was because of this thing called PJM. And I just don't believe that 18 or 24 months ago, I would be in a situation where I would be at a barbershop and I would hear a conversation about RTOs, regional transmission organizations, or ISOs, independent system operators, the entities, the organizations that run our wholesale energy markets. This electricity prices uh, are increasingly how individuals are identifying with inflation in this country. And the unfortunate part, especially because of the geopolitical uh, challenges, terrors that we're in the middle of now, there is no clear end in sight. And certainly no clear end in sight if we don't aggressively begin to pursue measures both at the regulatory and policy level, and they have to be local, state, and federal in nature as well. So, just to wrap this up, so in Powerline's view, that the primary or foundational reasons why electricity costs are rising is due to an outdated utility business model and an outdated accompanying energy regulatory framework. And the symptoms of this are often what we point to in terms of the drivers of increasing unaffordability, or the drivers of the energy affordability crisis. One is the impacts of extreme weather events on our electrical system in particular, and even more granular, the impacts of extreme weather events on our transmission and distribution system. That's where we're seeing the bulk of increased prices flow through utility bills. The bulk of increased prices on utility bills are not from generation. So, the statements about data centers leading to increased costs for consumers because we're having to build all of these new generation facilities to push electrons to this new source of load, or this growing source of load. Uh, yes, data centers are impacting utility bills in certain places, in certain regions, service territories, our wholesale markets. But this has been a growing challenge over the last decade, and the vast majority of the bill impacts that consumers have experienced over the last decade have been from transmission costs and distribution costs. So that's like a clear statement to make. But that's not to let the hyperscalers off the hook either. If we, again, don't put in the right policies and regulatory measures in place, and we allow the hyperscalers to convince utilities and public officials that the only way to meet their load growth projections is to build new shiny poles and wires and to build new natural gas fleets by the gigawatt, then yes, there is going to be a massive unaffordability tidal wave that is going to be put on the backs of consumers if we move forward with business as usual. But I digressed a bit. So the first impact that we're seeing in terms of drivers of energy unaffordability for customers, it's the impacts on the grid of extreme weather events. When I was in Michigan, we saw it pretty clearly, and the utilities were not shy about this. Over the last 15 years, uh, high precipitation and high wind events, ice storms, tornadoes, particularly in Michigan, but we're experiencing increased tornadic activity throughout the Ohio Valley region as Tornado Alley doesn't shift, but it kind of expands out of the Great Plains. All of those are increasing the need for maintenance, repair, replacement on the energy system. And it is also just forcing a lot of those improvements to be made on a higher frequency than in the past. The second driver of the energy affordability crisis as it relates to the electrical grid is aging infrastructure. Many of the components on our electrical grid are 40, 50 plus years old, and that's on the transmission side of the system. So those are the very large metal poles and wires that you see driving in rural America or alongside the highway. Uh, Many of the components on that system, as well as the distribution system. So that's the last mile, the wooden poles and wires that you often see going directly to small businesses or to your home. And now, because of deferred maintenance and replacement by utilities of the components on that system, we're starting to see a lot of those components reach the end of their useful life. And so a lot of those repairs and replacements and the cost thereof are flowing onto utility bills as well. And then the last major driver is the volatility in natural gas prices. And that's due to a couple of reasons. One, in the United States, we are exporting more natural gas than ever. Natural gas used to be a regionally priced fuel. Natural gas was something that was extracted, derived in the United States or in Canada, and then shipped via pipeline regionally throughout the no, throughout North America. Now that we are increasingly building liquefied natural gas terminals and exporting natural gas, especially to Europe following the Russia and Ukraine conflict, we're now seeing natural gas increasingly become not a regionally priced, but a globally priced commodity, more akin to oil, for instance. And therefore, when you have natural gas that is more globally priced, then global disruptions, whether it be conflicts, supply disruptions, or otherwise, can flow through, and we are less insulated domestically to those impacts, despite having a tremendous supply and ability to extract natural gas in this country. And then the second piece is that price volatility has been exacerbated in the natural gas area because of the growing dual fuel dynamic of natural gas. Again, historically, natural gas was largely a home heating or an industrial heating fuel. Now, increasingly, uh, natural gas is also being used for electricity generation. Over the last 2 decades, well over 100 coal-fired power plants, for instance, have either been converted or replaced to natural gas in the country, and that trend is only continuing over these next several years and decades. For instance, in the state of Michigan, likely towards the end of the 2030s, if not the mid 2030s, we will have no investor-owned um, coal-fired power plants operating in the state. You may have industrial, you may have some smaller utilities that are not investor-owned utilities operating coal, but our state's largest utilities will largely have migrated away from coal-fired power plants for electricity generation. But what they have backfilled that with is largely natural gas generation as well as renewables and other resources. And so you're having natural gas just compete in a lot of different ways, which is causing impacts on prices. You're having natural gas now being exported to international markets through the liquefied natural gas trade. You're having natural gas being used as it traditionally has in the home and industrial heating space. And now, increasingly, you're having natural gas also be used in the electricity generation space, where now it likely is, if not very close, the largest source of electricity generation in the country. So that is just a little bit of a preamble to give some background on the energy affordability crisis where PowerLines sees its role and also some of the more granular reasons for why this energy affordability crisis has reached an apex at this moment. Uh, it has taken us well over a decade to get into this problem, so it's going to take some time to unwind the necessary regulatory and policy mechanisms to stabilize, or better yet, drive down energy prices for consumers. But ideally, we can find some partnership here in this call and after this call to hopefully begin to work on those changes at the local, state, and federal level. So happy to take questions or any other comments that Pete or Michael, you all have at the intro here.
Sure. Wow. Thank you so much, Tremaine. It's delightful to have that insider's perspective and expert perspective, and really appreciate it. And appreciate what you and Charles and the entire team at PowerLines are doing. I think that's a tremendously valuable organization. So I've captured 11 questions out of the chat, and I see John already has his hand up, and I didn't capture a question from him. So what I'll do is I want to start with a couple of things in the chat, John. No insult or anything. But let me get a couple of these teed up. Since we have quite a bit of questions and a lot of participants, why don't we try to keep our answers really concise? And Tremaine, you're our main questioner, our main answerer, but Michael and Jay and Mark and others and I will chime in. So first, David Emberling had a question. Understanding is that utility rates are not based on operating costs, but on total investment. So if you could just, I think you touched on that already in your answer, but if you can just give us a quick breakdown on utility rate making.
Yeah, I think I understand where the question is coming from. So the peculiar aspect about utility regulation is that investor-owned utilities, or the regulated utilities in many states, are able to earn a return on equity for investments they make in capital expenditures. So investments related to the building of new transmission poles or wires, are the investment that they make in building a new power plant. They're not only able to earn dollar for dollar return from consumers in making that investment, but also an adder on top of that, often of anywhere from 9, 10, in some jurisdictions, 11 plus percent. And you can think about what your portfolio earns personally or in your 401k and compare that to, a utility being able to earn on a billion and a half dollar natural gas power plant, another 10% on top of that. What they're not able to earn a rate of equity on is operations and maintenance cost. And so this has many of us believe led to perverse incentives in terms of does a utility invest in the O&M to maintain the current system, or do they try and drive regulators to invest in shiny new investments while deferring cost on the O&M side, because that is, again, from consumers, something that they can only pass through on a one-to-one, dollar-for-dollar basis. And so another piece that PowerLines issued, and I can make sure that you all have, is a CapEx report where we have identified through earnings calls of investor-owned utilities what the CEOs of these utilities have said in their own words they're looking to put forth in future rate cases in regards to CapEx. And the numbers are jaw-dropping, as many of you could guess. But I'll make sure to put that link in my follow-up email to you, Pete and Michael.
Awesome. Super appreciate that. If you could just add on to that discussion of the investor-owned utilities, one of the things I read frequently is that one of our challenges is that essentially that the current structure of where the investor-owned utilities earn their profit is misplaced for the current day. It goes back a century to when it was important to build out the grid rapidly nationwide in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and into the rural areas. Now, a number of folks are suggesting we may be better served if the investor-owned utilities profit incentive came from performance-based rate making, how
Yeah.
to reliably and integrate distributed energy resources into the grid. What do you see happening there?
Well, it's certainly a path that I strongly encourage, and performance-based rate making is happening. It just you may not hear it called as such. In the state of Michigan, for instance, we allow for the utilities to earn an incentive if they achieve and go beyond their energy waste reduction, which in Michigan is just what we call our energy efficiency goals. Uh, uh, Performance-based rate making is one avenue by which you can incentivize utilities to make investments in O&M, for instance, maybe like a tree trimming program, and to reach or exceed those metrics and be able to earn a little bit of an adder similar to what they would earn in deploying their CapEx dollars and earning a return on equity there. Um, these are not changes that can be often as commissioners, we say that we are creatures of statute. You will hear commissioners often say that. And what that means is that commissions work within the box defined by the black letter law of the legislature of statute. Uh, Commissioners are often hesitant to go beyond that box because, of course, we can be recalled. We can be brought before the legislature for testimony. We can have our decisions in cases contested by a utility, appealed by a utility, and taken to a state Supreme Court. So, performance-based rate making is one of those policies where you all can play a role in advocating to a state legislature, for instance, and then having the state legislature impose that process on the commission, which then they can impose on the utilities that they regulate.
Hey, Pete, can
Fantastic.
I add one thing? Just
Yeah.
that be interesting to see if Tremaine agrees. I wouldn't describe the profit or the return for regulated utilities as risk-free, right? I mean, it's not like owning a U.S. Treasury. Uh, there are true ups that can be contested. If they don't deliver on a program when they have a rate case to recover the cost of that program, it could be denied if they didn't deliver what they had promised to deliver. So there are ups and downs. It's not guaranteed, although some may argue it's less risky than others who are earning that amount.
I agree. And this goes to, again, the capacity of commissions to be rigorous stewards and investigators of those dockets, of those rate cases, of those true-ups, and challenge where necessary what the utility has stated in those filings. But you are correct. There is some risk there.
Fantastic. Sure appreciate it. Let's uh, Ray, I see you've got your hand raised. May I, before you jump in, Ray, may I give John the microphone since I took it away from him earlier? John Trombold, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask questions. I appreciate it. I'm thinking of the history of the commissions and utilities going back to the 1930s, and I imagine the system was a response to private monopolies. And so just to generalize, it seems that these companies, in receiving this designation as natural monopolies, are understood to have a kind of social license. And that is an important principle, which is perhaps not nailed down the way the statute might be in each state, but it is relevant to the political context that we're now facing. And as we consider the hyperscalers, similarly, they are expecting a certain social license to make an undue burden on the grid and on all of the consumers of electricity. And as a side note, both utilities and hyperscalers, data centers, are not very popular in the United States at the moment. So it does seem that this idea of a social license can be invoked in order to strongly encourage progress, innovation, use of new distributed energy resources, virtual power plants, and the like, which many environmental and energy groups are advocating. Is that a reasonable rhetorical approach or understanding of the situation, or is the problem best addressed legally through state legislatures, through governor's actions? Where do you see the locus for change and the relevance of this idea of a social license for the utilities and the hyperscalers alike?
Yeah, this could be a separate webinar in itself. But not well liked is saying it politely. In Ohio, the hyperscalers are data centers specifically are polling worse than nuclear power plants, polling worse than fracking. Uh, and the industry, I think what's happening is you're seeing the industry is split at least in two different ways. You have a camp that I won't name who they are, but I think they see this era politically as an opportunity to just force through these projects as quickly as possible, wherever possible. And I do think that you're starting to see emerge another set of actors, of the third-party data center developers, the hyperscalers, and the like, who are genuinely seeing this as an existential threat and trying to figure out how do you deploy their infrastructure alongside community benefits packages, alongside grid impact funds. I worked with Google and another environmental nonprofit on the deployment of a grid impact fund here in central Ohio that ran parallel to some of their data center facilities in the region. Uh, I have significant concerns about AI and its impacts on culture, society, and everything else. I've been talking with my uncle, who's a former chemist at Dow Chemical, about singularity since the late 90s. But if these, so I'm putting that aside. If these projects are going to happen, then I think it behooves communities, state legislatures, and governors' offices to be strong, firm advocates for their citizens and ensure the best deal possible and the lowest environmental and societal costs possible when those data center developments arrive. And there are some best practices that are emerging out of that. Best practices on limiting water use, best practices on the interconnection, energy demand, load growth question. Um, but it is going to be an immense challenge. And in terms of your everyone here area of work, what I see as the huge potential is, again, if if we move forward with trying to push electrons to this new load by building new shiny wires and energy facilities, um, the affordability impacts are going to be tremendous. And so we have to optimize, use the grid more efficiently. And there's some coalitions, Utilize Coalition, for instance, that's come about to say, hey, if we're using some parts of the grid at only 50% capacity, how can we make the grid more efficient through technologies, processes, and otherwise, so that we can provide more power to those data centers without building new power plants? And I think the other thing is, how can we use distributed uh, generation resources, use energy storage to free up capacity uh, by lowering the consumption of small businesses and residential customers, and thereby allow those electrons to potentially be used by these hyperscalers. But also, you're making investments in communities, investments on people's homes that they can actually see and realize. The hyperscalers have done themselves no favor because no one really understands or sees what the positive benefits of any of this are. And until that happens, I think they're going to increasingly face resistance. And whether you want to advance this from a technological standpoint or a national security standpoint, it is not going to happen. And the pushback is going to, frankly, get more violent and more severe if they don't come to the table and offer something substantial to communities and residents. Sorry, that's a very long. I, there's a lot more I could go into there, but I'll stop on that end.
I think every single question we ask ourselves here today could be its own webinar. We're 9 minutes from the top of the hour, so let's kind of treat this now as lightning round from this point forward. One thing I would like to add on that last piece is, data centers are starting to get a bad rap, as Tremaine just described, but solar and wind and batteries also. Nationwide, we have 3,420 counties. Currently, around 605 of those have either temporary or permanent restrictions on either solar or wind or batteries. And much of that energy is fueled, pun intended, by the fossil fuel industry through social media and their think tanks. We're now seeing some of that love go to the data centers, but we have to be advocates for supporting solar and wind and batteries, even if communities have concerns about data centers in their backyards. All right, Ray, over to you, my friend.
Great. I just wanted to go back to the rate of return issue a bit and sort of tease the next meeting that we're going to have. I'll be talking a little bit about rates and what we're doing in California, the climate organization called Climate Future California, what we're doing to try to lower them. One of the vulnerabilities, or one of the things that I think is not really well understood when we talk about rate of return. It seems like a fat, juicy target to hone in on the utilities and ratchet that down. But one of the things about a utility, particularly here in California, is it's really, really vulnerable to interrupted cash flows and very, very uneven cash flows due to natural disasters. So you, in a rate case period, you get your 9 or 10%. But if you have to spend a lot more money to take care of a wildfire, you get 0% that period. And so that's a real issue. So that impacts the dividend, and that impacts the stock price very negatively. That makes it harder for the utilities to borrow at a reasonable rate. So it gets pretty complicated. And we'll talk a little bit about that next month.
Great. Thanks so much for that intro, Ray. And I was going to be updating the audience a little bit on that, and we'll add a tiny bit more color when we're at the top of the hour. All right. Let's see. Other questions? Anybody else in the audience want to open mic, or I can go back and read some from the chat? Jay.
Hey, Pete, I just want to make one note as we talk about data centers and industrial emissions. I mean, industrial emissions have been the fastest growing area of energy consumption for many years now, right? And so it's data centers, but it's also other industrial users as well, both for gas and energy production. But for data centers, I want to highlight that the other thing we're seeing is right now, given the 160 gigawatts of new capacity that's projected, right, that their data centers are adding prime power backup gensets so they can run off grid. And the reason I bring that up is because they use diesel and they use natural gas, which really, and at the same time, we're rolling back air permitting requirements. So we're going to be exposing communities to lots of particulates and other emissions that if communities aren't smart and they don't speak up during the siting process, they're going to really get screwed by this. So, there's a human health component I think we forget about beyond the economic component that we need to incorporate in our conversation. So anyway, that's kind of my question as I talk to you about that, of bringing that other piece into the conversation.
Yeah, I'll quickly comment on that. Yeah, that's the next area that I perceive. You're seeing it happen with one of the Grok AI facilities outside of Memphis. If you've heard that story in the news, the way they got around their air quality permit was that they used generators, but put them on the back of tractor trailers, and then just took the trucks off the front end of them. But they were mobile then pollution sources because they were technically able to be moved. And that is how that facility was able to power up quickly using those gensets, but also evade around those state air quality permits. And so that is the impact that I see becoming much more known going forward. And I was at a data center convening in DC, and I heard a developer talking about the behind the meter question. And what he said was behind the meter really isn't a long-term solution for any of these data centers. They're using behind the meter now in order to scale up quickly. Speed to power is everything for them. That is it. Which is why I think we can get a lot of concessions out of these hyperscalers. But they're looking to use those gensets, those diesel natural gas generators, as a bridge to get through the long delays in the interconnection queue. They eventually want to be interconnected to the grid because there's frankly not enough gensets that they can reliably have produce power affordably for the size of these hyperscale facilities.
Awesome. Thank you. I've got two more questions that I'm going to try to fit in before the end. First, there are two questions in the chat about intervenors. And we talked a little bit about them, but Tremaine, can you just kind of give a brief summary of, what are interveners, who are the big ones and the little ones, and any specifics on sort of language that people should use when reaching out to contact ARP or one of the other interveners.
Yeah, so interveners are a formal way for public or organizations, companies, you name it, to take part in a contested public utility filing or case. It is certainly something to investigate for your organization, but intervention is kind of the highest bar of PUC engagement. And often what we do at PowerLines, we're developing this ladder of engagement so that organizations know, yes, you can intervene, but you have to often get an attorney who's very specifically aware and knows of the PUC process and rules. You often have to bring in expert witnesses, which is more cost and time. But there are many other ways that organizations can engage, whether through public hearings, technical workshops, just getting and asking for a coffee with commission staff in particular, but also commissioners. Commission staff are very important because commissioners are elected, are appointed. Average term of a commissioner is 3 to 4 years. I worked with commission staff who were at our organizations for 20, 25, some 30 years. Those are the people that are the institutional character, bread and butter of these organizations. And meeting with them can be oftentimes more influential than meeting with a commissioner who may be gone by the next election cycle.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. I think that's going to round us out. I can't say enough, Tremaine, how great it's been to have you on to help us understand this. Thanks to the audience. What a tremendous set of questions and interaction. I'm sorry we didn't get to everything. We'll try to follow up on a few of those, maybe in our email. But please mark on your calendars the second Monday in June. Doggone it, I should have had this open. June 8th. How to reduce utility rates and bills. We just heard Ray Welch give us a very short teaser about that, but we're going to talk about how CCLers in California made a difference last year in this arena, and groups around the country are working on the same thing. So we'll see you back here June 8th and again on July 13th for 2 more deep dives into public utility commissions and all that they mean for us. So huge round of appreciation. Thank you so much, Tremaine. Really appreciate it. And thanks all for being with us.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. That's really great. I'm saving the chat.
Thank you.